I have never visited him in his scrumptious quarters 5 below the opera, across the dark lake, but he has described them. Rich drevens, exquisitely carved tables, amazing silk and satin draperies, the large, superbly embellished mantelpiece, on which rest two curious boxes, one containing the figure of a grasshopper and the other the figure of a scorpion. He can, in discouraging upon his domestic arrangements, become almost merry. For example, speaking of wine, he had stolen from the private cellar of the opera board of directors. Very adequate, Montreux. 4 bottles. Each director accusing every other director. I tell you, it made me feel like a director myself. As if it were as if I were worth 2 or 3 millions, and I had a fat, ugly wife. And the trout was admirable. You know what the Poles say: fish, to taste right, must swim 3 times in water, in butter, and in wine. All in all, a splendid evening. But immediately alters the mood by making but he immediately alters the mood by making some gleam observations. Our behavior is mocked by the behavior of dogs. It is not often that the accents of joy issue from beneath that mask. Monday. I'm standing at the place I sometimes encounter him. A little door near the rear of the opera, the building that has 2,531 doors, to which there are 7,593 keys. He always appears suddenly. A coup de theatre, that is, to tell the truth, more annoying than anything else. We enact a little comedy of surprise. It's you! Yes. What are you doing? Waiting. But today, no one appears, although I wait for half an hour. I have wasted my time, except, faintly though many layers of stone, I hear organ music. The music is attuned, but unmistakable. It is his great work, Don Juan Trumpet, a communication of kind. I rejoice in its immense buried talent. But I know that he is not happy. His situation is simple and terrible. He must decide whether to risk his life above ground or to remain forever in hiding in the cellars of the opera. His tentative testing explorations in the city, always at night, have not persuaded him to one course or the other. 2. The city is no longer the city he knew as a young man. Its meaning has changed. At a cafe table in a place where the light from the street lamp is broken by a large tree, we sit silently over our drinks. Everything that can be said has been said many times. I have no new observations to make. The decision he faces has been tormenting him for decades. If after all But he cannot finish his sentence. We both know what he meant. I'm a bit distracted, a bit angry. He knows how many nights I have spent this way, waiting upon his sighs. In the early years of our friendship, I proposed vigorous measures. A new life. Advances in surgery, I told him, had made a normal existence for him possible. Techniques. I'm too old. No one is ever too old, I said. There were many satisfactions open to him, not at least the possibility of service to others. His music, a home, even marriage and children were not out of the question. What was required was boldness, the will to break out of old patterns. Now, as these thoughts flicker through our brains, he smiles ironically. Sometimes he speaks of Christine. That voice. But I was perhaps overdazed by the circumstances. It ranged from low C to the F above high C. Flawed, of course. Listed heard her. He cried out, possibly somewhat deficient in temperament. But I had temperament enough for 2. Such goodness, such gentleness. I would pull down the very doors of heaven for it. Tuesday. A few flashes of lightning in the sky. Is one man entitled to fix himself at the center of the cosmos of hatred or remain there? The acid, the lost love. Yet all of this generation is cold. There may have been wars, invitations, assassinations, discoveries, perhaps practical affairs that have been assumed. In his mind, it's towering importance. Does he fear the loss of the stipend, 20,000 francs per month, that he has not ceased to extort from the directors of the opera? But I have given him assurance he shall want for nothing. Occasionally he's overtaken by what can only be called a fit of grandiosity. 100 million cells in the brain, all indignant in being the phantom of the opera. Between 3,000 and 4,000 human languages, and I am the phantom of the opera of every one of them. This is quickly followed by the deepest despair. He sinks in his chair, hand over his mouth. 40 years of it. Why must I have him for a friend? I wanted a friend whom could be seen abroad, with whom we could exchange country weekends on our retrospective estates. I put these unworthy reflections behind me. Gaston Leroux was tired of writing The Phantom of the Opera. He replaced his pen in his pen holder. I can always work on The Phantom of the Opera later, in the fall perhaps. Right now I feel like writing The Secret of the Yellow Moon. Gaston took the manuscript of The Phantom of the Opera and he put it on a shelf in the closet. Then, seating himself once more at a desk, he drew towards him a clean sheet of foolscap. At the top he wrote the words, "The Secret of the Yellow Room." Wednesday. I have received a note urgently requesting a meeting. All men that are ruined on the side of the natural proportions. The note concluded, "This is surely true. Yet the vicinity with which he embraces ruins its unexampled. In my experience, when we meet, he is pacing nervously in an ill-lit corridor just off the room where the timpani are stored. I notice that his dress, almost too immaculate, is disordered, slept-in-looking. A button hangs by a thread from his waistcoat. I've brought you a newspaper, I say. Thank you. I wanted to tell him that I have made up my mind. My hands are trembling. I hold my breath. I've decided to take your advice. 65 is not, after all, the end of one's life. I place myself in your hands. Make whatever arrangements you wish. Tomorrow night, I quit the opera forever. Blind with emotion, I can think of nothing to say. A firm hand clasp, and he is gone. A room is prepared. I tell my servants that I am anticipating a visitor who will be with us for an indefinite period. I choose for him a room with a splendid window, a view of the scene. But I'm careful also to have installed a heavy velvet curtain so that the light with which the room is plentifully supplied will not come as an assault. The degree of light he wishes. And when I am satisfied with the accommodations are that all could be desired, I set off to interview the doctor I have selected. You understand the operation. If he consents to it, we will have specific psychological consequences. I nod. He shows me in a book pictures of faces with terrible burns before and after having been reconstructed by his science. It is indeed an album of magical transformations. I would wish first to have it examined by my colleague, Dr. W., a qualified alienist. This is possible, but I remind you that he has no intercourse with his fellow man, except myself, but that was not the case. That originally, the violent emotions, the revenge of jealousy, yes, but replaced now, I believe, by a melancholy so deep, so all-prevailing. Dr. asked some mock sternness. Melancholy, sir. It is an ailment which I have some slight acquaintance. We shall see if his distemper can resist a little miracle. And he extends to the neutral space behind us, a shining scalpel. But when I called for the Phantom on Tuesday, at the appointed hour, he is not there. What vexation! Am I not slightly relieved? It can be that he doesn't like me. I sit down on the curb, outside the opera. People passing look at me. I wait there for 100 years, or until this hot meat of romance is cooled by the dull gravy of common sense once more.